The winner of this year's Barzun Prize is Darrin McMahon of Dartmouth, who is currently the Mary Brimstead Wheeler Professor of History at Dartmouth. And the award is given for his book, Equality, the History of an Elusive Idea. Now, that title tells you something about the challenge of writing this. Many of you are familiar with the older tradition of the history of ideas by Arthur O. Lovejoy, where an idea had a particular structure and lasted through history. The elusive character recognized by McMahon is that equality is not an idea of that sort. It's elusive, it's vague, it's highly contested. So what we have in this remarkable book is he takes us from cave dwellings back in the age of early primitive times, as we say, through ancient Greece, through early Christianity, through pre-Enlightenment Europe, through the French Revolution, through Hitler's Reich, through the civil rights movement of the United States, and a variety of other episodes where the idea of equality is given particularity and put to specific uses that McMahon is very effective in explaining. Now, many of these episodes of the elusive idea of equality are what we would loosely call progressive, in that they did advance what we would recognize as a more equal society. Not always. And one of the virtues of this book is that it also points us to occasions when the idea of equality turned out to be a kind of fraud. And those of us on the committee, Michael Wood and Robert Pippin and myself, were particularly charmed by a series of quotations from episodes where equality was sort of fraudulent. Like our favorite quotation was from Anatole France, when he's describing his society in 19th century France. And he's talking about the majestic character of equality in post-revolutionary France. The majestic quality of our laws forbid the rich as well as the poor to sleep under bridges, forbid the rich as well as the poor to beg in the streets, forbid the rich as well as the poor to steal their bread. So this is equality of a sort. Now, this book is anything but a muckrake of the history. Rather, there are many examples of where we as readers are invited to share the traditional spiritual enchantment, we might say, of the idea of equality, and also to remember its political utility. So we're ending the book, he ends the book with an account of Martin Luther King, whose notion of equality always as a dream, not something necessarily fulfilled, but as a dream that's always out there. Darrin McMahon is an intellectual historian of the very highest rank, and it is my privilege to award him the Jacques Barzun Prize.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you all. I've been told in no uncertain terms to keep this brief, and I promise to do so, but I'd like to make just two quick points. And one is that if you'd asked me a year ago, what award could you possibly receive that would be most meaningful to you, I would have chosen this one. Not that I win so many prizes, but this is particularly meaningful to me because of a number of reasons. One, Jacques Barzun was a great cultural historian of ideas, who strove to write history over the longue durée and connect kind of deep, resonant concepts to present concerns. And I've tried to do that in my own work, and that really resonates with me. Two, because the prize committee is formed not only of very fine intellectual historians like David, but philosophers and people in literature, it's an interdisciplinary group, and I've always tried to do interdisciplinary work, and so that was particularly meaningful. And finally, because if you look at the list of people who've won Barzun prizes over the years, some of my most revered historians are on that list, and so I feel a little bit like I've entered, the Valhalla of history, and so I'm tremendously moved and grateful for the award. The second point is that, and this won't be a surprise to so many people in this room, scholarship is often very lonely. And it's lonely, it can be, but it's never conducted in isolation. It always depends upon networks of friends and of people and of sort of unseen labor that is indispensable to producing scholarship, and particularly a book like this that took me about 8 years. My family was that network for me. They didn't complain, or at least not too much, when I would go upstairs to work in my study or take a research trip or attend a conference. And so I'm particularly grateful to my son and my daughter and my wife for allowing me the time and resources to carry out this work. Thank you very much.
Our next award of the day is the Judson Daland Prize for Achievement in Patient-Oriented Clinical Research. Dr. Judson Daland, a prominent Philadelphia physician and outstanding figure in medical research, left the bulk of his estate to the Society in the 1930s as an endowment to be used to support research in clinical medicine. This prize recognizes outstanding achievement in clinical investigation, particularly patient-oriented research. Clyde Barker, member of the Daland Prize Committee, will present this year's prize. Clyde.
David Fajgenbaum is an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. He went to college at Georgetown, where he quarterbacked the university's football team. His advanced degrees are from Oxford and the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. And when he got to medical school at Penn, he was confronted by a potentially fatal disease. He decided to do something about it, and he succeeded. He's won many awards, and I'm not going to bother to read what you've got in your program anyway. In fact, I'm curtailing my introduction because his story is so compelling that I don't want to steal any of his time. David, the floor is yours.
Wow. Thank you so much for that introduction. Such an honor to receive this award, and it is especially meaningful to me because repurposing old, neglected drugs, which is what I did to discover a drug to save my life, isn't always celebrated. We tend to focus on the next new technologies and blockbusters, treatments, and rightfully so, but every day I'm reminded of the importance of repurposing through the thousands of patients that we've saved. I've seen them go from preparing for hospice care to beginning their first day of college, from getting their will finalized to walking their kids down the aisle 8 years later. And in my case, surviving long enough to marry the love of my life, Caitlin, and to have 2 beautiful children. As you heard earlier, I became very ill with a horrible disease called Castleman's when I was a third-year med student, And I went on a journey to try to discover a drug that already existed that could maybe save my life. I didn't have 10 years and $1 billion to create a new drug from scratch, but I thought if I could figure out what was wrong in my immune system, maybe there was a drug out there that could save me. And after lots of hard work, I ended up discovering a drug called sirolimus that's been around for decades. It was developed for organ transplant rejection, and I began testing it on myself. It's now been over 10 years that I've been in remission, and we've been able to treat many patients all over the world with that same drug. I am so proud of what we've achieved, but there is still so much work to be done. See, humanity has developed 4,000 drugs for about 4,000 human diseases, but there are still over 14,000 diseases that don't have a single approved therapy. I am so driven by the countless people suffering today from these diseases that could potentially benefit from treatments that already exist that were made for other conditions. And we're tackling this in 2 different ways. First, by performing deep immune profiling of patient biospecimens to uncover mechanisms that can be targeted with existing drugs, like how we identified mTOR and sirolimus in particular could be used to treat my disease and put me in remission for over 10 years. And second, by utilizing machine learning algorithms to systematically analyze the likelihood of all 4,000 drugs to be able to treat all 18,000 diseases. Whereas discovering sirolimus for my disease was like trying to find the lowest hanging fruit on one particular tree, we're now able to systematically look across the entire forest to find the lowest hanging fruit anywhere. We've been able to identify things like leucovorin for a rare subtype of autism where kids have folate receptor antibodies and therefore don't get folate to their brain. We've identified peritumoral lidocaine injections for patients with breast cancer that have improved survival and outcomes with a simple injection. And recently, we found 3 multiple myeloma drugs that we thought could be useful for POEM syndrome and treated the first patient ever earlier this year, and he's doing incredibly well right now. But this impact is not possible without our incredible team. Colleagues like Mary Zaccato from the CDCN and Every Cure, mentors from Penn like Arthur Rubenstein, Dean Epstein, Mike Parmacek, Dan Rader, who have been by my side from the moment I joined Penn, and my incredible family. My dad, my 2 sisters, Caitlin, my in-laws, my brother-in-law, you all have been with me from the very beginning. And I want to especially thank my amazing wife, Caitlin, who's here today. Like was shared earlier, she's also put up with me through a lot of really busy moments. She's been with me through a lot of highs, a lot of lows, and we've got 2 beautiful children together. I also want to thank one person who is not here today. That's my mom. This month marks 20 years since she passed away from cancer, and 20 years since I promised her that I would dedicate the rest of my life to trying to find treatments for patients like her. So I just want to close by thanking all of you for this incredible honor, and I hope you'll join us in always performing patient-centric research and partnering with us to unlock cures that are hiding in plain sight. Thank you all so much.
Our third award of the day is the Henry Allen Moe Prize in the Humanities, which is awarded annually for the best paper in the humanities and jurisprudence read at a meeting of the Society. Michael McCormick, a member of the Moe Prize Committee, will present the 2024 Moe Prize. Mike.
The recipient of the 2024 Henry Allen Moe Prize in the Humanities or Jurisprudence is Jan M. Ziolkowski in recognition of his paper, The Juggler of Notre Dame and the Medievalizing of Modernity, presented at the APS in April 2019, at the April 2019 meeting, and published in the Proceedings of the American Philosophical Society, Volume 164. Jan Ziolkowski, Arthur Kingsley Porter Professor of Medieval Latin at Harvard University, was elected a member of the APS in 2017. Juggler is a witty romp across 7 centuries of French and American literature and popular culture. Magically, in true jongleur fashion, it manages somehow to condense a 6-volume work of immense and rigorous humanistic scholarship, plus exhibition, catalog, translations, all separate and additional publications into a succinct and jovial essay. What might seem a hopelessly obscure medieval hagiographical tale about a pious but illiterate street entertainer turns out in Professor Ziolkowski's expert hands to reverberate through the centuries. The retired juggler knows no Latin for fancy prayers, so he can only dance and juggle before a statue of the Virgin Mary in his monastery, winning her miraculous approval in the face of invidious sniping from his monastic betters. Ziolkowski tracks the tale's transformations in a discreetly breathtaking display of cross-temporal and cross-disciplinary humanistic scholarship that starts from the philology of a 13th century French poem and takes us down to American popular culture. 1896 beer ads, 1930s radio consoles, and 20th century Tony Curtis via Anatole France. In so doing, the thoughtful Ziolkowski opens a new window on the profound but complex impact of medieval European civilization on Atlantic modernity and conveys its essence in sparkling fashion. Established in 1982 by a gift from the widow of Henry Allen Moe to honor the longtime head of the Guggenheim Foundation and president of the American Philosophical Society from 1959 to 1970, it pays particular tribute to his firm commitment to the humanities and those who pursue them. The Moe Prize is awarded annually to the author of a paper in the humanities or jurisprudence read at a meeting of the Society. The selection committee was Linda Greenhouse, chair, senior research scholar, Yale Law School, Michael McCormick, Gillette Professor of Medieval History and Chair of Science of the Human Past, Harvard University, and Brent Shaw, Andrew Fleming West Professor of Classics Emeritus, Princeton University.
Did you get the juggler? He's on my tie. Thank you. The talk for which this prize has been awarded was delivered 5 years ago. Because the interim has been eventful, how's that for understatement? That Friday seems far more than a half-decade removed from now. Thinking back on the occasion brings joy. I feel the deepest gratitude, first, for having been invited to present before this august assembly, a medieval tale and its later receptions. Second, for having had that spoken act enshrined in the printed proceedings. And finally, for receiving the present recognition. I'm also appreciative to the story itself for all that it has taught and delighted me. And I had not planned to embarrass either myself or my wife by saying something about her, but I will also thank her because I would not want to be the only speaker not to do so. She knows without my saying just how much I value the support that she's given as I've followed these bizarre whimsies of mine. Like other communities, the American Philosophical Society must transform in reflection of the times, but it negotiates changes with a care that befits its venerability. Not tripping and falling become priorities when heading gradually toward 300. That was a joke. The warm and wise welcome of the APS carries still greater meaning as many institutions in our tumultuous nation and world have stumbled, because the society displays and fosters in its members daunting qualities of mind and heart. This honor will remain unforgettable to me. Please accept my warmest thanks for having heard me out, both back then and right now, and for continuing to intimidate, inform, and inspire me with your expertise and insightfulness. Thank you.
Before we award the fourth prize of the day, we are going to induct our next award recipient into the membership in the society.
Will Dr. Naomi Oreskes please come forward to the President's desk to sign the roll book and then receive a formal welcome from the President. Mr. President, I have the honor to present Naomi Oreskes, Henry Charles Lee Professor of History and Science and Affiliated Professor of Earth and Planetary Science at Harvard University. She is an internationally renowned geologist, science historian, and author of both scholarly and popular books and articles on the history of Earth and environmental science, including The Rejection of Continental Drift and Plate Tectonics, and Insider's History of the Modern Theory of Earth. Her research focuses on the earth and environmental sciences, with particular interest paid to understanding scientific consensus and dissent. In recent decades, she's been a leading voice on the issue of anthropogenic climate change, and her essay, The Scientific Consensus on Climate Change, has been widely cited both in the United States and abroad, including in the Royal Society's publication, A Guide to Facts and Fictions About Climate Change, and in the Academy Award-winning film, An Inconvenient Truth. She's a recipient of the American Geophysical Union Presidential Citation for Science and Society, and as you may have guessed already, she is this year's recipient of the APS Patrick Suppes Prize in History of Science for her book, Science on a Mission.
By the authority and in the name of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia for promoting useful knowledge, I do admit you a member thereof. Congratulations. Please come over for a photo with us. Thank you. So, continuing with this year's awards, our next prize is the Patrick Suppes Prize in the History of Science. The Suppes Prize was established and funded in 2006 by Patrick Suppes, a member of the Society for 22 years until his death in 2014. This prize honors accomplishment in three very different and deeply significant fields that reflect the spectacular scope of Suppes' own interests. The prize rotates each year between philosophy, psychology, and the history of science. Angela Krager, member of the Suppes Prize Committee, will present this year's award.
I am delighted to speak on behalf of the Committee for the Patrick Suppes Prize in the History of Science in awarding Naomi Oreskes this year's prize for her book, Science on a Mission, How Military Funding Shaped What We Do and Don't Know About the Ocean. It was published by University of Chicago Press in 2021. In this ambitious and important book, Oreskes charts the history of American oceanography before and after World War II, tracking the interplay of ideas, instruments, institutions, and politics. Science on a Mission focuses on developments at three major research sites: Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in Massachusetts, Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California, and Lamont Geological Observatory in New York. At all three institutions, the U.S. Navy was the dominant funder of post-war research. In turn, researchers provided their military sponsor valuable information, even as they vastly expanded basic knowledge about the ocean. However, as Oreskes demonstrates in detail, Navy funding also limited the very scientific questions that were asked and the approaches taken at these institutions. The result was a flourishing of knowledge about the physical structure of the oceans, the geology of the seabed, and the circulation of currents, as well as the unexpected discovery of life around deep hydrothermal vents. Other questions, though, were marginalized, particularly concerning biological oceanography. Moreover, the American system of security classification restricted the sharing of basic knowledge about the oceans through the scientific literature. Science on a Mission has been a long-awaited contribution to our field, and it's based on a formidable set of published and archival sources. Oreskes is a master of explaining the technical content of oceanography. In addition, the book is so well written that every chapter reads as if it were a detective story, bringing to life a wonderful cast of characters, including Henry Stommel, Roger Revelle, Joanne Malkus, and Charles Hollister. The result is a path-breaking account of oceanography that remains accessible to readers who know nothing about the field. Oreskes' magisterial book offers a telling example of how patronage can shape the growth of knowledge and how U.S. security classification can restrict its circulation. I want to acknowledge the other members of the committee. We scoured the literature for all the books we could consider this year and worked hard, and there was a unanimous consensus that Naomi Oreskes' Science on a Mission was our winner. The other members of the committee were Gordon Baim, Jen Buchwald, Lorraine Daston, Ruth Schwartz-Cohen, and Susan Wolf.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Angela. Thanks to the committee. This prize really means a lot to me in many ways, and I thought I'd just take a minute to talk about four. It means so much to me, especially in this historical and political moment, to be here at the American Philosophical Society, a society that has been dedicated for nearly 300 years to the pursuit of knowledge, to open inquiry, to open discussion. I also want to thank APS because APS gave me some of the seed money to do this project nearly 20 years ago, without which it would have been much, much harder to get this whole project off the ground or launched into the ocean. As Angela said, this book has been a long time coming. It's a long book and it took a long time to write. As some of you know, I've written many books. This is the one that took the longest. So it's really especially significant and gratifying for all that hard work to feel like it's paid off, and particularly because we increasingly live in a time when publishers are pressuring us to write shorter books. And I've written short books, and there's a place for short books, but I think it's just so profoundly important that as academics and scholars, we continue to insist upon the importance of sustained inquiry over time on big questions that can't be answered quickly. I also want to say one more thing about the relationship of this book to my public work, because as some of you know, I've done a lot of work as a public intellectual, and I consider that work to be very important, but I also believe that everything I have done as a public intellectual is absolutely grounded in the foundation of my academic work. And without that academic foundation, it would not be possible for me to make the public interventions that I do. My husband, Ken Belitz, is not here today, but I would be remiss in not acknowledging a husband in this august thing. And since the book is about oceanography, I thought it would be perhaps appropriate to quote from the dedication of the book. For those of you who read it on the committee, you know that I thank my husband, Ken, for surfing all the waves that I generate. Thank you very much.
As one who myself, at an early stage of my career, had support from the APS, I very much resonate with Naomi's comments. Our final award of the day is the Carl Spencer Lashley Award. The Lashley Award was established in 1957 through a gift from Dr. Lashley, a member of the Society, a distinguished neuroscientist and neuropsychologist. His entire scientific life was spent in the study of behavior and its neural basis, or as he phrased it, quote, the discovery of principles of nervous integration which are as yet completely unknown, end quote. Lashley's famous experiments on the brain mechanisms of learning, memory, and intelligence helped inaugurate the modern era of integrative neuroscience. The Lashley Award is made in recognition of work that continues his legacy in the integrative neuroscience of behavior. Nina Jablonski, Vice President of the Society, will present the 2024 Lashley Award.
Thank you, Roger. It is my terrific pleasure to present the Carl Spencer Lashley Award to Margaret Livingstone. I'm also delighted to say that following this award presentation, Professor Livingstone will give us a presentation of her groundbreaking work. Margaret Livingstone, Takeda Professor of Neurobiology at Harvard Medical School, has made spectacular discoveries about the organization and specializations of neural processing pathways in the primate visual system, establishing principles that have guided the work of neuroscientists around the world. In early work, she discovered within the primary and secondary visual cortical areas an intricate sub-organization of pathways specialized for processing information about color and contrast. This architecture in the occipital lobes of the brain is foundational for processing higher order visual features in the temporal and parietal lobes. In these cortical regions, Livingstone and her colleagues demonstrated a remarkably selective system of 6 small visual areas in each cerebral hemisphere that processes information about facial features and that are critical for facial recognition in primates. Using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, to guide their electrophysiological and anatomical studies, they showed, surprisingly, that nearly every neuron in these 6 areas responds selectively to faces, and that the neurons in the highest order face areas are more responsive to the faces of specific individuals. In the past decade, Livingstone has tackled the problem of how this face system develops in young animals. She has asked, is selectivity for faces encoded in the genome, or does development of this system depend more on early visual experience? In meticulous experiments, she showed that primates are born with a scaffold of topographically organized visual areas in the temporal lobe, but that these areas acquire specialized domain function, e.g., face selectivity, only via early visual experience. Botox users, beware. In addition to her laboratory research, Livingstone has explored the ways in which vision science can inform the world of visual art. She wrote a popular book, Vision and Art, that has sold more than 30,000 copies to date, and she is a frequent speaker at art, museum, and filmmaking venues. Livingstone has earned acclaim in the art world as a scientist who can communicate with artists and art historians to everyone's mutual benefit, an interdisciplinary dialogue very much aligned with the values and goals of the American Philosophical Society. Professor Livingstone, please join me on stage to accept the Lashley Award.